What's going on, everybody? Jordan Griffin here. Right after I applied to grad school, I started seeing article after article after article talking about,
oh, MBAs aren't really worth it anymore.
and I was sitting there looking at all these things thinking, good God, did I just make a potentially disastrous decision by applying to grad school and attending an MBA program? With so much money on the line, I was really starting to feel a little bit concerned. I'm now about halfway through my program, and definitively I can tell you, no, don't do it. Don't attend an MBA program. It's not worth it. All the lessons you learn, all the new information, different ways of thinking, it's totally not worth it. No, I'm just kidding. Please, don't take that seriously. There are many, many reasons why it may be and may not be worth it, and later on in this video I'll go over kind of from my experience what I think those reasons might be. But first, I'm going to need you to enroll in smashing the like button down below. Something you'll often see with MBA enrollment is that they typically ebb and flow with the economy. So enrollment is usually down when we're in a good economy, people have good jobs, they're happy with their pay. Enrollment typically increases during a recession. Back when I graduated from my undergrad in 2011, I did consider briefly attending a full-time MBA program right after undergrad. But I decided that I really wanted to get some real-world experience so that I could better incorporate that into my MBA program so that I wouldn't be confused when we start discussing ROI, things of that nature, where prior to being in the professional world, that was really nothing that ever crossed my plate. Now, as I mentioned, enrollment does tend to fall when we're in a good economy. So back in 2019, if you can think back to the before times, the economy was in a really great place, unemployment was really low, so enrollment had really declined over the previous 2 years of 2017, 18, and then into 19. So much so that some large programs had actually made the decision that going forward, they were going to be canceling their full-time programs. So I know the University of Iowa, they totally canceled their full-time program, as did the University of Illinois. And my program, they also made the decision in late 2019, maybe early 2020, to close their full-time program so that that group that enrolled in fall of 2019 would be the last full-time program. It's not just state schools or smaller regional universities that were feeling the pinch of low enrollment numbers back in 2019. In fact, some schools were even experiencing double-digit declines in their enrollments. And in 2018, the top 10 business schools combined saw a decrease in about 3,400 total applicants, which was about 6% lower than the previous year, which went from about 57,300 all the way down to about 53,900 total applicants amongst those 10 programs. So as I mentioned, as the economy rolls along and it's doing well, you see enrollment numbers decline. However, in recessions, MBA applications tend to increase. And as we're in a recession now, and were back at the beginning of the pandemic, in 2020, there was an increase in total applications to MBA programs. And in fact, according to the Graduate Management Admission Council's annual application trends survey, in a sample of 1,085 respondents, they found that 67% of those polled said that they received an increase in applications for entry in 2020 versus 2019. Among full-time programs more specifically, they reported they saw a 69% increase in volume. Nice. Including 35% of programs that reported applications were up significantly over the previous year. And when I say up significantly from the report, they say that that means that they were up at least 21% or more. So they saw significant growth in their applications versus 2019. As we saw with the increase in applications in 2020, even the COVID-19 pandemic didn't scare people away from enrolling in business school. And as I mentioned before, this is just kind of further proof that it tends to follow an ebb and flow cycle of the economy. So in a recession, people are more willing to take a risk, given that the economy may not be doing as well. Maybe you lost a job, you've been thinking about going to graduate school, but the timing was never just right, but suddenly you find yourself out of work, you're a little bit more nervous about where things are going, maybe your company had to furlough people, and now would be a good time for you to enroll and attend your graduate degree program. An interesting thing that I did learn from the articles was that many people who applied to school in 2020 actually deferred their enrollment until 2021. So if you applied in fall of 2020, my guess is that you were thinking, hey, maybe by the time fall 2021 rolls around, the pandemic will be over, I'll be less afraid of, attending school in person, etc. So if you did defer to 2021 to the fall, let me tell you some of the things that you've been missing. So as my program in, maybe spring, whenever everything shut down in 2020, we shifted to an online portion only. And I can tell you from experience of doing this for the past almost year now, obviously I much prefer being in person. They have switched some of their classes to a hybrid format now so that if you want to attend in person, you can go for it. Obviously you have to wear a mask the entire time you're in the classroom. But for the most part, I've found that the majority of my classmates have chosen to remain online. And that's something that I've been doing. And I can tell you from my personal experience of being on Zoom one night a week or a couple nights a week for 3 hours, it's incredibly draining. Obviously, you don't have the factor of, commuting to your school, having to be in there in person, making sure you've got your meal figured out before you go to class, but you really miss that connection. It's definitely not something I'm going to take for granted again, is just that connection with your classmates and being able to network and see people and really engage in a discussion much better than you're able to through Zoom. Mercifully, our professors have started figuring out, and I don't know if this was a tool that Zoom launched at some point during the pandemic, but you can do these little breakout rooms now that helps to kind of facilitate the conversation a lot easier, so that instead of trying to discuss a case study with 30 people, you might be thrown into a smaller group of maybe 4 to 5, and then the professor can kind of pop in and see how you guys are doing. As we've seen business schools kind of adapt to these new realities, you're seeing more and more offerings. So maybe in the past, you were only offered the full-time MBA program, that was it. Now, you might have a full-time or a part-time and an online that are all available at whatever university you choose. And some are even going deeper and drilling down into, more specific masters in business degrees of, maybe just finance or just marketing, etc. As I mentioned, with economies that tend to not be doing so well, enrollment does tend to rise, given that the economic realities are shifting greatly. So you have to kind of consider going to a full-time program, you have to weigh the opportunity costs associated with that. I know at my university, prior to closing down their full-time program, they said it would take about 18 months. So you're really looking at like a year and a half of lost income, with the benefit coming out the other end of it is that typically your salary will increase versus when you went in. Another item you have to consider when applying to a full-time MBA program is the cost of the program itself. So top business schools are well over $100,000 nowadays. Harvard Business School, for example, with tuition, your living expenses, like your housing, etc., any other fees they have, you're going to be looking at about $111,000 over the course of the program. And Stanford Business School is kind of in the same range, but with housing, tuition, fees, etc., you're looking at about $118,000 for the full-time program. Now, I don't know about you, but dropping $100,000 plus on an MBA was not really something I was considering, just due to the fact that even with an increase in pay to 150 grand, I mean, that's maybe a year's salary just to go to business school. So my program is, not quite that high. It's about $50,000, and I'm covering about half of that cost on my own. And so it's really impacting my ability to, invest in anything other than, my 401k or my Roth IRA. My wife and I have been discussing for a while now of, looking into real estate investing trying to find some other sources of income, because when the pandemic hit, we were both very fortunate in that we kept our jobs, but I think it was kind of an awakening for both of us that, oh, like if we don't have this money coming in, there's nothing coming in. And so being in an MBA program where I have to really focus on maintaining my costs really impacts our ability to invest in our future. But I am, at least considering once I get out of the program in about a year and a half or so, my salary should hopefully increase, and, lifelong earnings will increase probably exponentially due to the fact that I've got an MBA. I could definitely see the cost being a deterrent for many people. If I was making 125 to 150 grand already without having an advanced degree, I would not even consider it, because I just don't think that the benefits are there to outweigh the costs associated with a program. Even a program like mine where you're only paying $50,000, I just don't see that there would be that much of a benefit for you if you're already making, 6 figures. I just don't see that there would be any reason why you would burden yourself with that debt when you're already making so much money. With many schools now offering online only versions, it might be beneficial for some people. Like if you're maybe like a single mom working full time, an online MBA is probably a good option where, you don't have to figure out childcare on top of everything else you're doing in like a full-time program, where you can kind of split your time wisely and focus on the things that matter. With the rise of online MBA programs, I see that it would be very beneficial for some people. I personally would recommend choosing either a part-time program where you are in class at least a few times a week, or maybe just once a week, because especially now since the pandemic, I'm really missing that face-to-face interaction with other people and really learning from other people's experiences, sharing ideas, and kind of engaging more easily in debate. If you are looking into an MBA program, I really urge you to do some research on professors. So some programs might have really more research-focused professors, which is fine. They've got the scientific background. They've really done their homework. A lot of them obviously have PhDs, so they're very intelligent people. But in my program, I've really found a benefit from learning from more real-world examples. So professors who have, experience working for some very large, multinational firms in various departments, I just really find learning from them to be much more interesting because they have more experience from the real world environment to pull from versus just, an academic background. So is it worth it? Honestly, there's really no answer to this. It's such a personal decision that you have to decide for yourself whether it's going to be worth it to you. You really need to weigh the benefits and costs of really any advanced degree, whether it be an MBA, a law degree, or a medical degree. You need to look at the cost of the program and say, is it really worth going into sometimes, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt? But you need to really focus on, okay, if I do go into that much debt, what does my earning potential look like in the future? So if a typical MBA salary is, let's say $110,000 and your program is 50, I think you can kind of weigh the benefit there that, all right, so if I'm only making 70 now, by spending the 50, it'll get me up higher so that I will, over my lifetime, be able to earn a significant amount more income and really benefit myself and my company by getting the degree and having that knowledge in the long run. After a year and a half in my program, I can say without a doubt in my mind that it is definitely worth it for me. I am learning so much every single week and every single semester that I really feel it's beneficial, especially because my undergraduate degree is not in business. So I am constantly learning new concepts. I think if I had already had a business degree, some of the earlier courses I might have been a little bored with, like, oh yeah, okay, great, this is return on investment, yeah, I know that. Like, oh, credits and debits, okay, yeah, I remember that from, accounting 101. But given the fact that I learned none of that in my undergrad program, it has all been so beneficial, and especially learning new ways to tackle difficult problems. An MBA is such a personal decision. No amount of articles telling you that, oh, an MBA is not worth it, should really impact your decision. I'd obviously read those articles just out of curiosity to see what they're talking about, like I did, but at the end of the day, you have to decide, do the costs outweigh the benefits? Do I think it's worth it? Have I done my research? Have I looked through the pros and cons? And ultimately, you have to make that decision for yourself. With that, we'll wrap up the video, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. If you felt this content was interesting, helpful, boring, whatever, comment down below, like and subscribe. Maybe let me know if you're attending an MBA program currently, or you have in the past, or maybe you are like Elon Musk and think they are entirely pointless. Either way, let me know. We'll see you next time.